do it very well. Yeah.
Yep.
You get one shot at it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yep.
Of course, it's easier now than it was. I would wake up
This is the meeting I gotta go to.
during the night before a wedding.
You don't want to miss it.
Film, dreaming that I got the camera.
So why should we put more restrictions on it? They don't like it.
There she is.
Well, yeah.
What do you have next? Do I have what? No, I left my jacket in the car, I'm sorry. Rick?
What are we looking for?
10.
Tell an extra 10. That's how you know I should get right.
You can write with crayon, it's okay.
It works.
And then we're going to read in this, and then we're going to take these guys first. Okay.
Why isn't this one? I think it's broken.
Who is this? Oh, that's you? Oh, okay.
You want to know what that's for. You're clearly not a train aficionado. I'm an antique train collector.
Oh,
My son
no.
were
Watch
here.
out, she's good.
Is she?
My
Oh,
son
yeah.
were here.
We're really good at
You
that.
ready to roll?
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right. I apologize, we're a little late. I'd like to call this
Oh,
meeting to
really?
order.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And if I could we get the secretary to do a roll call, please?
Robert King. Here. I'm here. Mary Cronin is going to be absent. Diane Cervello.
She called me and she'll be absent.
Carla Morano.
Here.
Joan Mead.
Here.
Mary Comstock.
Here.
Ed Torian. Absent. And Paul Swenson. Here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. And could I ask that the secretary read the minutes from the meeting of May 14th? Sure. Please.
The minutes from Monday, May 14th meeting, all the commissioners were present. The commission had a discussion, accepted minutes from April 28th meeting. The commission heard input from the public, from Joel Urice, who spoke about the importance of an annual limit on bonding, from Lynn Waller, who spoke about, again, the need on capping the annual amount of bonding that doesn't go to referendum, and also she mentioned and brought up her opposition to the plan of combining the planning and zoning commissions. Margaret Mitchell spoke against combining the planning and zoning commissions, and Elise Marciano spoke against the idea of term limits on elected officials, and she supported an annual cap on bonding that is not required to go to referendum. We had a discussion with our counsel, Eric Gottschalk, regarding language for the preamble, and we also discussed our ability to revisit any issue that had previously been discussed before this commission, and we did then have a vote. There was a motion made by Diane Cervello, seconded by Ed Torian, to add language, the language per annum to the bonding section, 7-10 of the charter. That was rejected, that motion. The commission then discussed term lengths and limits for various elected offices in the city government. Those are the minutes.
Okay. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Just as a point of order, I think that the motion on the bonding passed by a majority. There were dissenting votes on that, am I correct?
I'm sorry. The motion did not pass.
Did not pass, that's what I said.
Right.
There were, the motion to provide a cap did not pass.
That's correct.
There were 3 people who voted for the motion.
In favor of that motion, that's correct.
Thank you. I just wanted to be sure of
5 against.
that. 5 against.
Any other corrections, additions? Then the minutes stand as read. We will now ask members of the public that would like to address us. Yes, sir. Please come forward, tell us your name.
My name's Herb Highline. I reside at 16 North Neck Road in Danbury. Been there for about 43 years now. Now, I'm coming here before you tonight on two issues that I think are very important for we the people, which I think you folks are representing. And I want to thank you for being on this commission and doing a great job so far, except in one area that I'll discuss shortly. The first thing I want to bring to your attention is, I think, in Chapter 7, which talks about finance, I guess, a new section should be added, 711, entitled Cost Reduction Programs. And it reads as follows. The City of Danbury, through the Mayor's Office and the Board of Education, through the President's Office and the School Superintendent's Office, shall implement and maintain by fiscal year a measurable cost reduction program. The results of the respective cost reduction program shall be made public at a public meeting no later than 3 months after the close of the fiscal year being reported on. You know, as a voter in the city, I have no measurable way of measuring elected officials. And one of the things we're experiencing is spiraling costs of government and education. So, as representatives of we the people, I think this would be an important insert into the charter. Okay. The next one I'm going to talk about is everybody's favorite, I guess, 710 borrowing. I'd like to confirm with the committee, since I haven't been to these meetings before, what has happened so far with this particular item. It's my understanding that you're going to raise the cap of borrowing from 500,000 to 2.5 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Excuse me, partially correct. The 2.5 is a trigger point, which if
I
a
understand.
bonding issue goes over 2.5, it goes to referendum. If it stays under 2.5, there's no limit as to how many
Okay.
bondings
Right,
can go.
that was one of the questions I
There
had.
is no cap currently.
Okay. And that there is no cap on the borrowing.
Pardon me?
There is no cap on the borrowing by fiscal year. In other words, a mayor, whoever he may be, can come in with increments of $2.5 million 10 times a year.
That's
There's
the
no
way it's
cap.
interpreted now, correct.
Is there a reason for that?
That's the way the charter was written before.
But you're revising the charter.
That's correct.
At this point, we've had topics of discussion on it. At this point, the vote has been, the commission is recommending to the council and to the mayor that they raise the cap from $500,000 to $2.5 million. And as you just heard in the minutes,
Right.
the idea of putting a cap on that was voted down at the last commission meeting.
I
So
understand.
that's where it stands.
I understand that. I'm requesting to review that again and put a cap. I don't trust anybody until they earn my trust. Okay?
Fair enough.
Okay. Now, I did a little analysis relative to this subject, and I found out that since the charter was last revised in 1990, the city budget and the education budget in total doubled from 107 million to 202 million. I also did a study on the $500,000 amount in this section, and I looked at the CPI to determine what it should be worth today. Does anybody know what it should be worth today? I'll tell you, 1.2 million. That's what the 500,000 is worth today. So I kind of understand how you arrive at 2.5 million when 500,000 did the job over the past years. So I request that we look at that again. What else we got here? Oh, we also have a savings account, which is called the unfunded balance, I believe. Last year was $23 million. This year, the mayor took $3 million of that and used it to fund the current $2.5 million that went out on notes. Now, if the mayor is tight for money, any mayor, he has that savings account to draw from. There's no need to go to $2.5 million of borrowing when he has that savings account available for his use with the permission of the common council. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for taking the time.
Rhonda, do you have a copy of your proposal for cost reduction?
Pardon me?
Do you have a written?
I can write something for you. It was my business for 20 years.
would you please?
Sure.
I think specifically the language you had about that section 711.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else from the public like to address this? Alan, I think we're going to bring you in under planning and zoning, but would you like to
Okay,
speak?
well, yeah, I just had a point of information. I'm not exactly sure where it is in the charter.
Just tell us who you are first.
Al Mead, 23 Jefferson Avenue. There is another part in the charter which limits the total amount of bonded indebtedness at a percentage of the grand list. I'm not exactly sure where it is, but it's in there. So there is a limit on borrowing. I mean, the mayor can't go out and go 2.5 million 100 times.
Ad infinitum.
Right. There is a limit.
And there are state
It's not in that
limits.
same section, but it's somewhere in there.
Thank you.
Not that I'm aware of.
State-
Pardon me?
State statute.
State
The
statute.
state statutes do have limitations, but the numbers are.
But that's not $947 million, I think, is it, in a round number, state statute, which is a big number. I'm sorry,
Okay,
go ahead.
that's okay. Who else? Anyone else like to address this?
Councilman Rotella.
Please.
Paul Rotello, 13 Liverpool Place, Danbury. First thing I'm going to do is read a statement from Councilman Sonic, who was not able to come here tonight. Also, Ben Chinazy was not able to come here, although he would have wanted to speak about this. He's at an Amos House function with one of your members this evening. He's planning on coming another time, so with your indulgence, I'll read the letter from Councilman Sonic and candidate. I'm going to speak briefly about the same. Dear Commission members, please accept, I haven't read this yet, so bear with me here. Please accept my apologies for not appearing before you personally, but as you may know, my wife and I are expecting soon and have an important appointment this evening. As such, I am sending my comments to you by email and hope that you will read them for the record. I know you have a major task ahead of you regarding charter revision. I appreciate all of your work and your allowing me the opportunity to make my concerns known. It is my understanding that the members of the Commission are considering increasing the dollar amount of bonds the city may authorize without such bonds having to go to the voters in a referendum town meeting. While I do not necessarily disagree with an increase in the non-referendum bonding allowance, I believe it is imperative that the Commission limit such non-referendum authority to bond to a specific dollar amount per year, either fiscal or calendar. Absent such a limitation, the city could authorize an unlimited number of bonds, each in the allowable amount adding up to tens of millions of dollars without voter approval. As you know, the current amount of a non-referendum bond is $500,000. However, due to the ambiguity in the text of the charter, $500,000 bonds were recently approved by the council. In fact, unless there is a cap on the aggregate dollar amount, an unlimited number of bonds could be authorized without voter approval. Therefore, I urge the Commission to clearly establish an absolute dollar amount of bonds which, if exceeded in any year, either calendar or fiscal, such excess would have to be approved by the voters in a referendum. I thank you for your attention to this important issue. Truly, Tom Sadi, Council Democratic Leader, Danbury County Council. Okay. Probably the least interesting aspect of any charter revision would be the actual legalese, the language itself. Everybody wants to do grand things with the new charter. Term limits, term extensions, remove council people, make the mayor stronger, combine planning and zoning, all kinds of stuff. So you can look back 10 or 15 years ago down the road. I did that. While the least interesting to many people would actually be the legal language, in many cases it's, as it turns out, the most important. We have had several instances during my 3 years on the council where the legal language of the charter came into big play. And there were many, many hours spent between council members and corporation council debating specifically where we stood on a particular issue of great import to the citizens of Danbury, Connecticut. I can name a couple of things. The parade ordinance, for instance. That went back and forth many times about the process. And as we all know what happened the last couple of weeks with the $500,000 bonding elements. There were several questions on that, including whether we even had the authority to do it in June, because the charter seems to indicate that we had to do it by May 15th. That's right here in the charter. I'm going to spare you reading the paragraph that it's in, but take my word, it's right in here. When we do the budget, the mayor has to submit it by a certain date, and the council has to act on it by May 15th. We didn't do that with the $500,000 bonding issues. There was a great opinion from Corporation Counsel as to why we didn't have to do that. But again, that's an opinion. You get three lawyers together, all due respect, you probably get three different opinions. You get seven Democrats, you get 14 different opinions.
You will be respectful to fellow commission members, please. Even if they're lawyers.
I would love to be able to sit down with you at length, maybe with a special committee, and go over each of my concerns about the language, but I am just one guy in the council, and believe me, if I spotted a few things that have come up with what I've had to be doing, I'm sure there may be more. All I'm asking you to do is take a look at the language in this document, and then try to break it. By that I mean, let's say that when it comes to passing an ordinance, there's several steps that have to be followed. In one of the cases, if you vote for an ordinance on the Common Council, there's a certain time limit where it has to be quote-unquote certified by the city clerk. Then it has to be published within a certain time, then it finally has to be signed by the mayor. There is nothing in this document that says anything about what happens if you don't do those things. We had an instance last year where an ordinance was not certified, was not published, and not signed within the time period, but it's still an ordinance, or it isn't. We don't know. Because while it says you shall do these things, it doesn't say what happens if you don't. The assumption is that they're telling you that you have to do these things to create an ordinance. The assumption, again, would be that if you don't do them, you don't have an ordinance. It doesn't say that. You can get legal opinions that say you don't have to. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense with me. And finally, with the $500,000 items, I may have mentioned this at the meeting, but it seems hard to believe to me that the original authors of this charter would have allowed the city of Danbury to borrow $500,000 5 times, one night, without going to the voters, but absolutely adamantly refused to allow the city to borrow $500,005. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. On the one hand, they're saying you can borrow 2, 3, 10 million, whatever you want, within the limits of the state statute. On the other hand, for a single item, you can't borrow more than $500,000. What if you were building a road and a road was $500,000 a mile, and you need 10 miles? You have to stop at the end of a mile and have a foot of dirt before you could, no. Clearly, I think the intent of the original authors was to limit borrowing without going to the voters for a one-shot deal for $500,000. The language is ambiguous. Ambiguous language is not the same as flexibility. I will grant you there may be cases where you want to include flexibility in your language. You want to give, under certain specific circumstances, the ability of the government to function in ways that we may not be able to anticipate. But that is not the same thing as having language that is either sloppy or ambiguous that allows people to take advantage of potential loopholes in the charter. So whether you, members of the commission, want to allow someone to borrow $2.5 million as many times as they want, or whether you don't, I think what you need to do is decide where you stand on that issue. The voters have made it clear to me that they want it done once. That's all they want. One time a year, whatever your limit happens to be, whether it's 1.3 million, the inflationary cap that we heard about tonight, or you want to make it 2.5 million so that at the next charter revision with inflation it will have reached that point. Because we're going forward here. We're not starting from today and finishing today. We're going to start today and maybe finish the next charter revision. Could be 25 years from now. So you might want to raise that cap a little bit to take into consideration some cost of living indices that may be going up 10, 15, 20 years down the road. But I think you need to decide whether it's for borrowing, ordinances, or any other thing, if the language itself is clear enough that it allows the city to do what it needs to do, but at the same time does not allow the city to do what might potentially be improper. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I have nothing written down besides the letter from Councilman Sadi, because what I'm talking about is infused throughout this document.
Any questions or comments from any commissioners?
Thank you.
Eric, Rick, were you going to say something? No. Oh, you looked?
Not yet.
Okay. And Paul, just to give you a little bit of background from where we are, anything you see in the charter that you think should be brought to our attention would be helpful to us, because most of us haven't been on the council. So as a result, Rick has been great, and he has brought several things that we've been able to tidy up in the charter, but things like the ordinance and being certified and things like that, that's not something we would find, because just a general reading of this, you wouldn't realize that that would be some kind of problem. So we're looking for those kinds of things if something does stand in the way.
I'd be happy at a later date to give you all the information and my thoughts on this. I'm not sure this is the proper forum, standing in front of you doing that. I'm thinking more of an informal meeting where we sit down together, but yeah, whatever you want to do.
Okay, thank you. But
Thank you.
many people have brought up very specific things that they've asked us to look at, and generally, I think we're committed to trying to look at everything that comes before us. It doesn't mean that how we may act on it.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public? Yes.
Hi, my name is Linda Galloway. I live at 231 Thaddeus Avenue in Danbury, and I'm very new to this process. I have no prepared statement, but I do have just a couple of comments. First of all, I do support Tom Sotti's letter, and I do believe that the charter should specify an annual cap for any kind of bond borrowing. And again, I'm going to demonstrate legal ignorance here, but I also feel that decisions of this import should also specify that there is some advanced public notification going beyond the typical agenda notification that the city gives, and I think also perhaps a full public hearing as opposed to the 30 minutes allotted for a regular common council meeting. So that would be something I would also, because I think that this is a very important decision. I think even if these decisions don't go to referendum, I think the public really does deserve a chance to get to the details. That wasn't the fact, and that wasn't the possibility, I think, with this last decision. So that would be something else I would suggest. I would like to know, are we investigating a standard practice in the business I'm at? We are always into best practices and doing some investigation. Is 2.5 a standard practice for cities of our size, for cities in Connecticut? That's a question.
Actually, we've looked at
Great.
cohort cities
Uh-huh.
to see how everyone does it, and Danbury's a little on the conservative side. when it
Right.
comes to that.
Okay, so 2.5 is in line
Well,
with...
or how it's done and whether it goes to referendum or not. So we have looked at that, but ultimately, it's up to this board to make a recommendation to the mayor and the city council.
Uh-huh. And is it also appropriate in the charter to require a certain level of documentation, a business plan, certain level of details? Again, going back to what would be available not only to council members, what would be available to the public before this decision is actually made. Again, that was something I was appalled.
You're asking in the budget piece or just in going to referendum? Because the bonding piece simply is a trigger point above which the mayor has to go to the public.
No, I'm actually, I think even for those projects that are, let's say, under the 2.5 level or whatever that is, a certain level of documentation that would be available to council members, to the public, that would really get into the details of what this spending is actually going to be on. Again, as a citizen, I felt very in the dark. When I sat in on the common council meeting last week, I was appalled at the lack of detail, appalled. So that would be something.
If I can add some perspective to that, the annual budget contains the capital
Right.
plan. And in the capital plan, which is solicited from the various departments and their needs, the annual budget includes the capital plan, which in effect is the beginning of the bonding process. When those projects are recommended by the mayor to the common council, the option would be to either fund that through borrowing or through the current operations, meaning the current budget. So there is detail available. Whether it is sufficient, I'm not prepared to say that. Maybe some of the councilmen could elaborate on that if they would like it.
But
It's
this is,
just my impression from the types of questions that were asked at the council meeting the other week that there were quite significant details that were omitted. I mean, whether it was that people didn't do their homework, no offense, or that it just wasn't available.
well, this discussion is getting beyond what we should be doing here.
Okay,
But
sorry.
if the council members would raise their hand, perhaps you guys could have a meeting in the hallway and just, because it would
Well,
be,
anyway,
it would be
that's,
helpful.
so I don't know if that's appropriate for the charter, but that would be something also. Okay.
Thank you. Any other members of the public would like to address this? We'll go to the back of the room, please.
Fred Visconti, 31 Mountful Avenue. I'm sorry, Fred Visconti, 31 Mountful Avenue. I'm just here tonight to also be in favor of Mr. Sadi's, Councilman Sadi's letter to you people in regards to the bonding issue. I think you really need to go back and study it, look at possibly putting a financial cap on it, and adding some language that really has to be added. It's a very important piece of material, and there's a lot of concern that I'm getting. I hear every day, and I'm picking up the phone listening to my constituents and other constituents from other areas. So I think you really need to sit down and take a look at that again and see what you can do with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman? Mr. Visconti? I also want to add, I believe you were the gentleman that was awarded a key to the city for your efforts.
Yes, sir.
Well, this commission would like to recognize your efforts as well.
Thank you.
For those who are unaware, this gentleman went into a burning house and rescued a member who was a Mitchell family, was it not?
Yes, it was.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you, and well done, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other members, all the way in the back, I'm sorry, yeah, in the back row, and then Lynn, you'll be next.
Frank Anders, 9 Terra Glen. I was coming prepared to talk to you about the concept of controls and the need for controls in any organization, whether it's public or private. But quite frankly, the memo that was written by Tom and the speeches that have been given since, I think really do say it all. Perhaps the thing that disturbed me more than anything else, that with the ambiguity of the wording in the current charter, rather than clearing up the ambiguity first and then making the decision to go forward, we chose to go ahead and push those 5 worthy projects through, and I will call them worthy projects. I don't suggest that we ought not to have spent that money. But I think perhaps getting rid of the ambiguity in the charter is critical. And just another thought, what you might think of is rather than setting a cap or a limit that's good for the next 10 or 20 years, build in some sort of escalator clause based on some quantifiable factor so that we're not stuck. If $2.5 million is what we absolutely need now every year going forward, and I would suggest to you that number is rather high, perhaps $1 million, and then escalate it based again on some quantifiable or known factor. Just a thought. That's all I have.
Thank you. Lynn?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry, it took me so long to get to you.
even short when I sit down. Lynn's Haversack, 110 Haystown Road, and I've had my knickers in a real knot over the bonding, the big bonding proposal, the 2.5 million. And it's for a couple of reasons. I've been paying attention. There was a budget hearing that included the capital projects back in, give me a month, May? No, the hearing. It was in April. And I went to the May Common Council meeting to speak on it and was told, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing the capital projects with the budget. We're doing them next month, come back next month. I hope that people doing the charter revision will look at the charter not as like our Constitution or not as the framework saying the way that we do things. I hope you would look at it as something that the public relies on. I mean, it says how many members of the council there are and what their powers are and what the mayor can do, but what can we rely on? What can we rely on month after month after month to be true? And this bonding proposal, we're relying on a single $500,000 trigger and then taking it to the voters. That's what we've relied on. We've relied on it for a long time. You may go forward and raise that to 2.5 million with no cap. And the voters out there who have been relying on the 500,000 are going to say, we're going to show those charter revision people, we're voting this charter down. And then what are you leaving us with? What are you leaving us with? You're leaving us with this interpretation from Corporation Council that the 500,000 has no temporal limit. So it could be 500,000 a month, a project, a quarter, whatever. So you're not fixing it. And I think the only way you're gonna fix it is which the public
properties. My law firm has probably represented most of the communities in this area in planning and zoning. We currently represent Richfield and Brookfield. One of those towns, as the gentleman indicated, has a combined planning, zoning, and wetlands commission. The other doesn't. In the last 20 years, I've concentrated my practice just in representing developers. I believe I understand thoroughly staffs of the commission work and how the developers think and act. I have nothing to gain by whatever you do. Believe me, I will be around a lot longer, and either way it works for me, but so I don't want you to think I'm speaking from a personal point of view if I express opinion one way or the other. The commission, this concept, I think, has been before charter revisions, prior charter revisions. I happen to be chairman of the Charter Revision Commission in Danbury in 1979 and 1980. Were you on it at that time? No. I don't recall the issue being before us at that time, but I know it was before subsequent commissions. I assume it was turned down, obviously. I have a tremendous respect for the effects that planning and zoning rules and regulations have on municipalities. If you don't appreciate how it can benefit or be detrimental to a community, you don't appreciate the power that these regulations have on communities and how they affect the communities. Danbury is unique, like the gentleman before me stated. It's different than the surrounding communities. Danbury has industrial, has high concentration of retail, office buildings. It has large or high population densities and a diverse ethnic population. You can't compare Danbury to surrounding communities. What works for them won't work for Danbury. Danbury has taken on burdens our neighbors refuse to take on, such as landfills, recycling, affordable housing. Danbury is the only area community that's achieved its affordable housing requirements under state law. Surrounding communities are nowhere near it. So Danbury is much different than other communities. When I started practicing law in 1968, the zoning commission was the common council of the city of Danbury. And I first appeared in 1968 and 1970, and it was much different. Fortunately, we had a state representative from Danbury at that time who changed the state legislation to prohibit legislative bodies from acting as land use agencies. So since about 1970 to now, that concept doesn't exist anymore. Danbury works under 3 land use commissions: a planning commission, a zoning commission, and a wetland commission, and they're all separate. The Planning Commission in Danbury acts on subdivisions. That's the division of land into separate lots. And they act on floodplain permits. They act on referrals from zoning commission as well, but that's created by statute. We're going to change that. The zoning commission acts on the regulations. They can modify or amend the existing regulations. They can modify or amend the existing map. They can change by map I mean they can change Deer Hill from one zone to another zone. They act on special permits for liquor stores, package stores, or restaurants. And they act on special permits for repair facilities, auto repair facilities. The Wetland Commission acts on developments that are located within areas that may affect the wetlands. These commissions can be separate by state statute, or they can be combined into one. One commission can act on all 3 or operate under all 3, such as Richfield. Richfield has one commission that's planning, zoning, and wetlands. Brookfield is separate. Danbury is separate. Bethel has combined planning and zoning and separate wetlands, which is what you're discussing. In Danbury, there's supporting staff for each of these commissions. The Planning and Zoning Commission have the staff, which is the planning, under the planning department. The planning director is Dennis Elper, as you all know. Under him are two other staff people who review projects, subdivisions, site plans, and zone changes. And under them are aides which prepare things. Also, there's two zoning enforcement officers, Sean Hardy and a gentleman under him. All those people are under the control of Dennis Elper. They're all civil servants, except for Dennis Elper. Eric, correct me if I'm wrong. There's only maybe one, two, or three people in the city that are not civil servants, employees in the city that are not civil servants. And one of those is the planning director of the city of Danbury. So he reports directly to the mayor of the city of Danbury, and he's subject to, his employment is subject to the mayor of the city of Danbury. The Wetlands Commission operates under the Director of Health, who is Scott Leroy, and I believe Scott Leroy is a civil servant. And under him is Dan Baruti. So they're the staff for the wetlands, and all others are the staff for either planning or zoning. They divide their chores up accordingly. Now, state law regulates the time periods for applications, for hearings, and the time period that matters must be decided upon. In Danbury, as in most communities, the staff, the planning staff, or the health department staff will play a significant role in projects in that they will prepare reports and review the projects. They'll prepare reports to the commission sometimes with recommendations. I can say virtually on all occasions and probably all the areas, but definitely in Danbury, the staff, whether it's the health department or the planning and zoning staff, have acted in a fair and unbiased manner as they should have. So that really isn't an issue that, as long as I've practiced, I've never had an issue with that not acting that way. But there's just that connection. Now, the pros and cons of merging the planning and zoning commission, as I personally see it, I've not talked very much about it. I think the pros for combination, and I'm not sure what Dennis has submitted, but the pros as I see it are its simplicity and speed of action. The simplicity in that you file an application, if you have one commission, they can, and if that commission requires them to wear the hat of zoning and planning at the same time, well, they can act on it. They can act on it quickly and smooth the process for the applicant, whether they approve or deny it. It's just a quicker and easier process, less expensive, etc. The second pro, I think the members may be more knowledgeable in all aspects of land use and planning and zoning. I think understanding both the subdivision site plan and the zoning regulations by way of amendment in areas, they will definitely become more knowledgeable in the whole process. Now, the reasons I think you should consider in not combining the two commissions are, one, that, the simple one is that it works, why change it? While there's always complaints, I think 99% of the time this process has worked. Secondly, the current system has its checks and balances. I think that there's always sometimes where you have to go back to zoning or planning, but there's two different commissions involved. And believe me, there's two different types of thinking involved. The third and most important reason I would have in not merging them is that, in my judgment, it would create too much power in too few people. Whether you're pro-development or anti-development, it doesn't matter. The concentration of the decision-making in very important issues will be left up to probably 2 or 3 people. Because those 2 or 3 people, even though you may have a commission of 7 members, whatever the charter says it will be, really will be controlled by the most influential members of the commission. And there usually are 2 or 3 influential members that can control a commission. There are towns that have combined commissions where there are members who have been on them for 30 or 40 years. The power is staggering. They're on them that long because they just love the power, in my judgment. And it's there, and you can't get them off. You know, you may think you can get them off, but you all know the political process, the nomination process within caucuses and things like that, and they just can't get off. They just don't get voted off. They're on there as long as they want to be, and they become extremely powerful. And being powerful in planning and zoning is, in my judgment, because I'm in that business, is you wield just tremendous power. You just wield tremendous power within the community. In my 40 years doing this, I haven't experienced this kind of concentration of power in Danbury with separate commissions. No one person or small group of people have ever been able to control any commission under the current structure that I've seen. Members don't become fixtures in Danbury. Usually after 6 or 10 years, they're very happy to get off. They've had it. The reason I think for that is because they're just one of several members on the commission. Their voice is heard, and they can't control that commission. If they could control, you'd see them on a lot more. And to me, that's good. I like change. I like different people on there. I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I think I've been friendly with them all, and I think everyone has always acted in good faith. I've accepted what anyone's decisions are, as long as they're acting in good faith, and as long as they give the other party on the other side an opportunity to express themselves. And that's how it's worked here in the process that we have. So that's really where I am. I have notes here about someone I know that's been on 30 or 40 years in the town, but we don't. Just excellent indeed. Okay. He had died before they took him off. Now, would you like to?
Well, just a couple of comments. Paul did a great job in the good
Tell
historical.
us your background with this.
Well, I served on the zoning commission for 6 years, 4 years as vice chairman, back from 87 to 93. And then subsequent to that, I served. Ran out of tape.
We're out of tape.
No, we're not. That wasn't me.
Subsequent to that, I served 2 years on the common council, and Paul is correct in that the zoning was part of the common council back in the early 70s. I agree with all his points about there's advantages to combining them, and then there's disadvantages. And he makes all the points. And one other thing I'd like to add. I was presented before the night of the meeting, and went to a meeting prepared, and listened to other people, and reach form an opinion, and reach a conclusion, and make a decision. That took a fair amount of time. And the salaries for zoning commission members it's unbelievable. Zero.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing with planning commission. Planning commission members are unpaid also. Difference being the zoning commissioners are elected, planning commissioners are appointed. I would think if you decide to combine them, that it should be an elected position. You might also, in combining them, if you decide to combine them, you might also want to expand the size of the commission. Just because of the amount of, I think it was a 7-member zoning commission now? How many are in the planning?
9 and 5 and 9.
Five in planning and 9 in zoning? Is that without alternates? Right, okay. Because there's what, 2 alternates or 2 or 3 alternates to the zoning commission? They'll probably ought to be increased by, if you combine them, ought to go probably like 11-member board. The advantage, and Paul correctly points out, is that there's never, you're hearing the same presentations by attorneys and developers and requests for zone changes, whereas we used to get referrals from the planning department, and then we would make recommendations to them, and we were not always on the same page. And it led to some, I'm not sure the smoothest of decisions reached, and it was not fair to the entrepreneurs who want to make development and invest in the community and broaden the tax base and all those things that they want to do. So it's a tough decision, and I'm on the fence. I can see the pros and cons of both, as Paul's correctly pointed out, and having experienced it, it's going to put an awful lot of burden. If you combine the commissions, it's going to put an awful lot of burden on the individuals of those commissions for the amount of time and effort it's going to take for them to serve the community correctly.
Questions or comments? What I remember from our meeting with Dennis was, he talked about the fact that sometimes he couldn't get zoning and planning on the same page. And that, and Al, you kind of alluded to that.
Yep.
And that seems to be the biggest reason for doing this, so that planning, they would do all their work, and it would lose something in the translation when it got to zoning. And he gave us a specific example of trying to hold light industrial land in the city, that there's very little left. He's always trying to hold on to it, but then projects would come up, and suddenly you can put in a Home Depot or Lowe's or something on very usable light industrial land. And he talked about the frustration of planning and zoning having all the right ideas, and then zoning would kind of override it. I just couldn't understand, why couldn't we get the information from planning and zoning, or from planning to zoning without it being a combined commission?
But isn't that good, that different people have different opinions, rather than having Dennis say, this is how it should, that's right.
Well, that's,
Say, this is how it should be, and 2 guys that are in control say yes or no, and that's it. I don't think you want that personally.
It seems like a lack of communications, Paul.
Well, no, it's not. It's a.
Oh,
I'm saying
lack
it
of
seems like it to
It
me.
almost seemed like
Would
one
that
was
help?
vision, one was like the extended vision, and one was, here's what we do day to day, and they seem to be at odds. And that's what we're trying to figure out.
Yeah,
Why
and
different people have different opinions.
right, and there was an issue where, while I was serving on the commission, that we changed a large IL-40 zone, a light industrial zone, to commercial to allow a commercial development.
Commercial development is like stores.
Yeah, right, like retail stores. Because there's hadn't been a whole lot of demand for manufacturing plants, not only in Connecticut, but in our country, for a lot of different reasons. So from a tax base, looking out for benefits of the city of Danbury and increasing the grain list to keep our taxes reasonable, we changed the zone to a commercial instead of light industrial. And that could be exactly, one of the things that the planning director probably wasn't in favor of.
But there is a plan, the Danbury plan.
Yes,
which
there is.
I've gone through. And I guess what's a little confusing is we set out a plan of action for the city, but that
Subject
can
to
be
change.
all, yeah, well, that's what it seems, thank you, Al. That seems to be it. We have it, and I recognize that's a snapshot in time, but is there really an effort to abide by the overall plan that presumably has been accepted by the mayor and common council and other folks involved in the development of Danbury? Is that something you would be involved in as well?
There's clearly an effort to abide by the plan. The state statute requires you for any changes to show how you're in compliance with the plan.
Mhm.
And the zoning commission or the planning commission will make you state those reasons. It's up to them if they feel that you are in compliance. The plan's
so rigid, there's the flexibility in it,
Right.
of course. But it, you have to be by state statute in compliance with it, or demonstrate it. And they have to make a finding that you're.
So would there be more flexibility because there's two commissions as opposed to a little less if it were just one?
Well, the plan of development is prepared by the planning commission. It goes to zoning, it's referred back. Zoning changes are done by the zoning commission with referral from planning. So everybody, has a say. I don't know, your question is.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems that Mr. Elpern's point was that we have a plan of development, the electors of the city they see this plan of development, and all of a sudden, out of the zoning commission comes a zone change that's at variance with the plan of development. And I think his point of so strongly advocating a combination of the two commissions is his belief that we'd hew a closer line to our general plan of development for the city of Danbury, with all our projects, with one commission.
It seems to me what he's saying is that, and I don't want to criticize him, but he would have more control if there was only one group to deal with and he was writing the reports for that group. It doesn't mean that, his report is correct, the zoning commission can find otherwise, the planning commission can find otherwise. And they have, both commissions have.
And
There's just much more independence.
And the plan of development is the vision of the planning director approved by the planning commission.
And in effect, the zoning board then implements or chooses not to implement the plan.
Well, the zoning commission gets requests from developers to modify it, to change it.
Or conform to it.
Right.
Well, the plan has recommendations for changes as well.
Mhm.
And people will come in to try to conform to them.
Is dealing with the city of Danbury easy, impossible, in between somewhere when it comes to these kinds of
It's the same
things?
as every other time.
It is.
At the end of the day, it's the same as every other time. You've got cooperative people you're dealing with, they give you their attention, and it's no different. Those who say it's too difficult here are mistaken. There's different kinds of projects here. In Brookfield, as they say, there's nothing like there is here. Not massive projects, not 500-unit projects. Different kind of projects that take a lot more effort by everyone to make sure they're correct when they get approved. So that's how you have to look at it. There's no difference.
Do we lose public participation opportunities by combining?
I wouldn't think so. Most zoning matters are public hearing. There are some planning matters that are not public hearing, so you might.
So what would
I
be?
don't think so.
I'm thinking of the transfer station that was recently proposed, that was pretty controversial and things. Had we had one board, could that have been done before people heard about it?
No, it'd be the exact same process. So at a public hearing, same people would have been out, same decision.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you taking the
Al,
time.
thank you very much. Thank you, Al.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay. That was number 4 on the agenda, that we moved to number 1. Any other discussion, and do we want to have other people come to address us? Do you feel you have enough information as a commission to move this forward?
The combination of planning and zoning?
You know, I think one thing resonates with me, and I hope that I'm wrong. From what Dennis had told us, is it's just seemed to me like there's better communications and planning would help the length of the meetings, and Al brought up some of the information they don't receive until the night of the meeting, and you have to read it, or the day of the meeting.
Or a day or two ahead.
So I think if maybe the process were improved, there would be no reason to consolidate these two. And I guess the thing that finally sticks in my mind is something that Paul says, and I guess it sums it up best for me. If it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. It doesn't sound like it's something that's broke. Am I wrong? Your opinion, Al?
I don't think it's broken, combination could be more efficient.
Could that be fixed with change in process and communication and longer lead times? Because one of the things that we heard, the commission has heard, is that if we consolidated these two, some of the commissions already spend, an enormous amount of time and go into the wee hours before they finish, and this would do nothing more than, exacerbate that situation. And it just seems to me, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but if material were to come to the commissioners earlier where they could read it, and I've been in some of the planning and some of the zoning meetings where literally the people who are addressing you present it at the meeting, or they give you the document at the meeting. Doesn't seem fair to the commissioners. So there should maybe be a better process and a requirement for them to submit this stuff.
I would point out that the presentation that's made, in general, is very rarely acted on that evening.
Right.
Because the commission members take the information that was presented to them, research it, digest it, and make a decision at the next meeting at the earliest.
But wouldn't it, I don't know, again, maybe my inexperience in this shows, but it would seem to me that if you had the information ahead of time, that while the topic is being discussed, that you can engage in the topic more, effectively, and you wouldn't have to postpone a lot of, not that you're gonna resolve the whole issue that night, but it would be something that you would be more engaged with the commission and with the developers or whoever is presenting the thing before these various boards. I've seen this in some of the things that I've attended. It just seems to me an awkward type of a process, Al. And I'm wondering if that wouldn't help. Because I can appreciate people, giving of their time and themselves to these commissions, and it seems grossly unfair that they have to go till 12 and 1 o'clock in the mornings. I mean, that's a tremendous burden to ask of anybody. And yet, it's a valuable service, not to be taken lightly. I mean, you affect the whole community. Mr. Chairman, I just wish that there was maybe I'm wrong, but I just think that the process needs to be reviewed before, we look at, not by us, but I think, the director and the administration needs to look at it before, we act on this, and whether we can do it within the time frame of what we have left, to come back at a later date and do it, or whatever the pleasure of the commission is. But right now, I'm not convinced that we need to combine these. I don't see any value.
What I'd recommend to the commissioners, we do have a report here that was done by the Mayor's Economic Development Task Force that was done in 2004. And we haven't had a chance to review it. Peter handed this out tonight, but let's take a look at that, and we will put this on next month's agenda to, again, review, and I would be more comfortable with more commission members here.
This was a submission from Mr. Alpern, who couldn't be here.
But for tonight.
Right. I think the only point was that this issue was just discussed by another group of people. And he referred once to the plan of the city of Danbury where mention was made of combining the planning and zoning. And this is just a different body that recommended the same thing.
Yeah. So what I'd recommend is take some time and let's take a look at this, and perhaps we'll put Peter, we'll put this on next month's agenda, or the next meeting agenda.
The next meeting's agenda.
Possibly, is
2 weeks.
assuming we don't get overrun, but I do think that will be a fairly long meeting. Okay, hearing no motions or anything regarding that, we'll move on to the next item, which is the commission will review and discuss language from Mr. Gottschalk, its counsel, for the preamble.
You wanted more, what, did you want reflected in here more, of we the people type stuff?
Oh, that is.
keep hearing this beeping noise and thinking it's the tape, and it's not.
What is
It's
it?
the elevator?
Is that what it is?
Is that what the
When it
beep is?
reaches the third floor.
Bill, you ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll. I handed out, I think at the end of April, some language for a preamble that proposed language drawn from work done by Peter J., by New Britain, I believe, and by Bob King, I think, who had proposed similar language in the context of a new section 1-4. So I think where we left this was, you all were going to look at this, think very carefully about changes you'd like to make. Somebody mentioned grammar, which used to never be my strong suit. I know how to use lots of words, but putting them together, with commas, that's. So I am receptive to any changes you'd like to make to what I gave you back in April.
Be appropriate, since a couple of the board members are not here tonight and they had some input into this, that we table this and move on to another.
You're right.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll make a motion, we table this,
Okay.
and we'll pick it up in the next meeting.
Motion's been made that we table. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe. Go quicker next time, please.
I'm sorry.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Thank you, partner.
Motion carries. You're getting me nervous. Okay, number 5 on the agenda.
Duty?
The commission will continue discussion on the length of term and term limitation for the following elective offices: mayor, town clerk, treasurer, city clerk, council members, board of education, zoning commission members, zoning board of appeal members. Just by way of information, the city clerk has agreed to come to talk to us about her position in general as it relates to the charter at the next meeting. So that will be probably item number 1 on the next agenda. What would we like to discuss on this thing so that we can start moving this down the line?
Point of view?
Mr. King?
The last meeting, I was quiet when this topic came up.
You were.
Very. And I frankly wanted to listen what the others had to say about it, which was one of the reasons that I did not engage in the conversation. I think this is a difficult subject. For one, I don't feel that I could support one direction or another without getting input from at least, the mayors, the previous mayors who have held, and the current mayor who has held this position, simply because I think we're speculating as to, how difficult it may be to recruit people for 4-year terms, either for the mayor or for the common council or other commissions. And this is an important item, and I feel it is worthwhile taking our time with this, and I don't think we need to carry this on for weeks, but I do believe would be remiss in our responsibility if we did not solicit the opinions of those people who held this office and also with the common council. So that's my
So,
point of view.
so who would you like to hear from then?
Well, I would,
The former mayors?
I would like to hear from Mayor Eriquez and Mayor Boughton and possibly Mayor Dyer. Those are the only surviving. The first Mayor Boughton, I don't believe is in physical health to address this commission. He would be very helpful, but I just don't think it would be, something that he could do. Also, I would encourage us to reach out for some of the common council members, past and present. And if we're talking about the commissions, likewise with those. I see no reason why we couldn't accomplish this within 2 meetings, scheduled being permitted.
So the active members of the current council, the active members.
And if there's any prior members that's of the common council that would, pardon me?
You can ask Lori.
Lori, yes, that's right, she was. But, So do we want to carry on this conversation tonight, or do we want to solicit?
Let's put together who we at least want to solicit information from. Let's work
Well,
on
are
it.
we in agreement that that's what others want? I mean, that's what I would like to see.
Peter, did you send out requests for former mayors? Maybe not on this specific topic, is that the?
At the beginning of our process, I think I did at the time of the public hearing.
I think you did.
At the
And
time
I think
of
it
the
was kind of
in
a.
December, at
Yeah.
the time of the public hearing. And we did actually take, we did hear from the public and other members regarding term lengths at that time. But there wasn't a specific invitation sent to all the individual members of all the commissions. I think the council participated in that invitation, the current members of the council. I don't know how we'd go about, I mean, it'd be a logistical nightmare for me to try to
Well,
reach everybody.
we could get emails to
Okay.
people, and there's enough of us
We
to
have
do
a-
that. The question becomes,
Can you help
the
us
question
with it?
becomes, how do you want to organize this? Do you want to hear from the mayors first, and we'll invite,
That would be appropriate.
and now we're going to be subject to their calendars somewhat, so that'll,
We're talking about their term in office, and I'm sure that at least the current mayor will be very interested in coming in.
I don't think it's something that they necessarily have to come here for either.
Or they could write a
They
letter.
can just
Right.
drop us a line and
That's
let
true.
us know
Good
what
point.
they think.
Good point.
yes.
Perhaps we could come up with some sort of questionnaire format that we could hand to them and have them submit to us, so that we could all review it before the meeting, and then we could discuss it.
If they want to come in.
And if they want to come and talk to us, then that's their prerogative.
Could do
But,
that.
you know,
Do we like
they're
that
very
idea?
busy people, but could we do some, you know,
Do you want to, would a committee of 3 people like to take that on, so that we don't have to meet as a commission to come up with the questionnaire? Or do you want to stay as a full commission and
is
work
that
this out?
allowed to do, a questionnaire? Could we take comments from them on that, in that form, and then
That's
distribute
fine.
them among us before the meeting to?
If you create committees, however, those committees will be governed by FOI, so just bear in mind that you have to comply with that when you go forward. There's nothing that prevents you from doing that, creating questionnaires, distributing questionnaires for responses from elected officials, it's all fine.
Probably get more input.
But if we just had a couple of members developing a questionnaire and not a subcommittee, then we don't have to comply.
If they come up with a format and then bring it back to the commission for
Right.
discussion, modification, and then transmission to the elected officials, nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so we can do that, we're in compliance with that law.
Sure.
What if we heard from Lori tonight, and then at the end of the meeting, develop the questions, or is it not, that going to take us too long?
Yeah, Lori, yes, there's nothing wrong with that. Lori, would you like to address this tonight? And I apologize for not calling on you earlier, because we try to get people up here early, so I apologize.
I'm Lori Huback, I'm the town clerk.
Have a seat.
I live at 1801 Eden Court. And I guess the first thing is you're talking about the term of office. I do feel, for me, I think 4 years. This is my second term, and I think it took me probably 2 years to start doing some, accomplishments that I had planned on doing. I've also been going to classes for town clerk, and that took me 2.5 years to complete all their classes. So I just became town clerk certified,
So it took how long to complete?
2.5 years.
So
to
2.5,
do the classes.
so you were elected, immediately started school, and took 2 years?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, thank goodness I won again, because I wasted 2 years of my classes. And especially I think the town clerk's office, because there's so much to learn, so many statutes that I have to follow, that, to try to turn that office over possibly in 2 years, I actually think is scary for the taxpayers.
Tell us what you do, what, the highlight, the most important things that the town
Okay.
clerk does.
Land records, so everybody's deeds and mortgages are on file there. Vital records, births, deaths, marriages, civil unions. ballots and stuff for elections. Different licensing, dog license, hunting license, fishing license.
It's a lot.
No, it is a lot, I'm just trying to,
And how many people, are there other people in your office?
right now, I have 6 people in my office.
And they are civil service?
Yes.
So managerial skills is also.
Yes.
Okay. What else would you like to tell us?
And Lori, your position is a state statute position.
Yes. Yes, state statute. And I don't know if you're looking on limitations and how, is that correct?
That's
How
another
many-
thing.
Term
The
limits?
term limits.
That's another issue that's before the commission, not necessarily so much for the town clerk's position, but it's an issue we're looking at. Do you have a view on,
Well, for the town clerk I do, because I think I've put so much time in studying into this. I think the town clerk has to be pretty knowledgeable on what they're doing. And I think it's pretty scary to get somebody in there that's just, body.
So it takes time to learn the job.
Absolutely, I mean, I had 13 years' experience in the office.
Right.
And honestly, if I didn't have that, I think it would have been scary for me to walk into that position.
and Lori, do you make policy?
No, I don't make policy. I follow the statutes. Everything is in that statute.
Peter, you mentioned statute, is the state statute guide the term of office of that position?
Yes,
It does.
yes, there are state statutes on the side.
And
Um,
it determines the term.
That it's a 2-year term?
No, it doesn't limit, it doesn't prevent you, for example, from changing the term for you.
Okay.
How about 6?
I believe that it's either 2 or 4, but let's check.
Most of the other town clerks in the area, are they 2-year terms, 4-year terms, do you know?
They vary. Some are appointed. Some aren't even elected. Some
Oh,
are
is that right?
appointed in Connecticut, some are 4 years. I think Bethel just went to 3 years. Richmond, I believe, was 4 years.
So you're basically recommending a 4-year term and no term limits?
Yes.
Oh,
Do you feel it should be elected or appointed?
I personally, after talking to a lot of town clerks like Bethel, who just did it, I believe, last year, I like the elected every 4 years.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You like going door to door?
Well, I think it's important that, the people have a say.
Who wants their information?
Yeah.
And age of identity.
Absolutely.
You have an enormous amount of information.
And we've done a lot of studying on
Identity.
everything, the statutes. I just passed the town clerk certification course, and that's a big handbook that I just passed.
So the size of the staff really wouldn't change your opinion, you doubled your staff,
No,
but it's not a function of that.
no. Because ultimately it falls on my responsibility.
It's the town clerk you're talking about, not the law.
I mean, they come to me all the time for stuff.
Is there any confusion between the town clerk and the city clerk when people call in?
People calling.
I'll take that as a yes.
Got a lunch with them.
So if you were working on the charter, would you try to clarify some of that confusion for people?
Yes.
So, okay. All right. Any other questions or comments, guys? Lori, thank you. You were very succinct. We got more information, more understandable information in the shortest amount of time. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And good luck. And congratulations on getting certified.
Thank you.
To the gentleman in the back of the room, we are talking about term limitations and things. We would like to address you if we may. Yeah, you can come sit up here if you would like, and you don't have to do that.
There's another council.
Yes, both.
All the total 13 Lincoln Place.
Wayne Perkins, 22 Main Street.
I mean, what zone or area are you in?
Fifth Ward.
Fifth Ward.
And Paul, you're in sixth?
Sixth, yes.
We are having a free-ranging discussion on how long terms should be for. How many years a term should be, not whether you should let you win twice and throw you out or anything like that.
Length of term, not term.
So length of terms, yes. So tell us what you think about, Paul, you've been re-elected one time?
Appointed once, elected twice,
Okay,
and served 3 terms elected on the zoning commission.
okay. You remain-
Serving my second term.
So what's your reaction to 2 years versus 4 years?
Well, in brief, I'm against term limits. I think the people should be allowed to choose how many times they want to send someone back, whether it's a year or a month or a month. I really have a right to take that choice away from people. When it comes to term lengths, I'm a little bit more ambivalent. For the closer you are to the electorate, I think the shorter the term should be. A senator who is off in Washington doing senatorial things can think big thoughts and stay on there for 5 or 6 or 8 years or whatever he wants to do. But for a guy who's in the neighborhood, who's representing the neighborhood, and that's what I do. I'm the guy that fixes your potholes, gets the dead trees removed from your curbsides, and gets the people who park on front lawns off the front lawns. So I'm the guy who does what you don't want to do because you're too busy earning a living, making a sandwich, going on vacation, whatever. But there's stuff that's bugging you about the city that you support.
Please vote on 1 second, please.
The size of the table. Probably, yeah.
Okay.
So, and you support a municipality, and you need things done, but you really can't do them otherwise, that kind of way. Well, I can, or someone like me. But I need to maintain that connection to you, and I think in order to do that, I need to run on a regular basis. It's all retail politics in Danbury. There's very little for council people, very little in the way of newspaper ads, direct mail, and things like that. Normally, we will knock on your door and talk to you. And you will tell me what it is that you want me to do. And then I will go out and do it. And after a couple of terms, if I get burned out, and really don't like the direction I'm going, you can get rid of me. But if you stick me in for 4 years, I can pretty much coast for 4 years and then pick up another election at the end of that time. Now I'm in for 8. And I don't even have to be that representative to get that 8 years. I mean, I always say a mayor earns his first term, his next 2 are free. So the mayor's a 4-year guy. You're talking about 12 years, 8 of which he could be coasting on. It can happen, it does happen. So my advice to the body is to consider shorter, not longer. I like the terms as they stand now. I'm very comfortable with. I will tell you, this is a true story. I campaigned last fall, and I thought I would be a wise guy. Normally, I would park my car in a cul-de-sac, and I'm in an area where they have long driveways, and I would walk up these driveways. But now that I'm a big shot elected official, I can drive up them. I got my little thing on my window that says "Big Shot Official." I'll drive right up your driveway, knock on your door. Here I am. Aren't you lucky I actually came up your driveway? Instead of doing all this walking, I'm getting in and out of my car 90 times now. And I wrecked my knee. And I had to have arthroscopic surgery as a direct result of the campaign going back and forth in the car. But I wouldn't change that. And if I run again next year, I will do it exactly the same way, but I'll try not to drive so much. I'll try to walk. I really believe fundamentally in a democracy, in a representational democracy, where anyone, whether it's me as your representative or you as mine, has to maintain that connection as often as possible. So I think for my money, short term is better than long.
Dwayne, any reaction?
I agree with many of the things Paul said. It does keep you closer to the voter, those short two-year terms. And that's one thing that I would probably keep around, at least for council people. Probably plenty at a level above us too, Mayor. Because once you start making those terms 4 years, regardless of the job that's being done, it becomes very long. So 2 of those terms back to back can be a very long time.
How do you feel about the term limit for the land use commissioners?
Same thing.
Or the learning service this evening?
Oh, you mean how often
How
should they
long?
run, or how many times
How
should they
long
meet?
should
Okay, so we're really not looking at limits, we're looking at.
I think she meant
No,
term.
or like term,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
tell you, as someone who serves on a land use board, there is a strong potential for conflict of interest, a very strong potential for conflict of interest. The people in general attracted to land use boards are directly or peripherally involved in land use decisions on a professional basis. You find a lot of mortgage brokers, you find a lot of real estate agents. It's just the kind of thing that you have. And for some reason, you don't get a lot of music teachers who want to be on land use board. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but for the most part, you do get people who are in the business. They bring a wealth of experience. They don't necessarily need a huge learning curve because they've been doing this in many instances generationally, going back 100 years in this town. I'm not going to name any names, but I mean, I'm included in that. My family goes back a long way, and for many of those years, it was involved in development and property management. So you bring that with you. But when it comes to land use boards, I'd like to see them in one-year terms, because I'm telling you, a lot of these guys on land use boards wind up on 7, 8, 10, 12 terms. This goes on and on and on. And, you know, we keep it short. It's just not. And this is from somebody who hates the campaign. I believe in the process, but I hate the campaign.
So you've been involved for a while, Dwayne. Have you been involved in other things before you became a councilman?
Not in the elected capacity. I've been an educator, worked in different types of business, not at a office.
So was the learning curve, was it overwhelming, or was it fairly easy to fit in and get up to speed?
Depending on which type of issues we were required to address, there was a pretty good amount of learning curve, but I was able to get to speed quickly.
I have a question too. Al, you were on both, zoning commission
Yep.
and the council. What do you think about term limits for those?
I agree, Paul made a great point, that when at that level, you need to be close to the people. I think two-year term is fine
For common council?
for common council.
What about?
I think the mayoral term should be a 4-year term. I think the city clerk term should be, or the town clerk should be a 4-year term. I personally think that the city clerk ought to be appointed, not even elected, appointed by the mayor, because the city clerk basically does common council business. Ought to be appointed by the mayor, approved by the council. That's, you know.
What about zoning commission terms?
Again, I agree with Paul. It has attracted, and they're still there, a lot of people that are involved in the real estate business, and they don't need much of a learning curve. I mean, I was a mathematics teacher, and I needed a bit of a learning curve, although I'd been associated with people who had been in the business. And I'm a native of Danbury, and in my time living here, I saw a lot of things, a lot of changes that have taken place, and what the needs were. So I think a 2-year term for zoning is fine also.
If we went to a 4-year term for the mayor, 2 years for council and other positions, how would we get anyone to come and vote for council members in the off years when it's not a big election? Would that be a concern?
It probably would be a concern, and I think the worry would be that they wouldn't vote. Basically, low turnout favors incompetence, so that it would almost be a de facto 4-year term for council people because they would simply co-speak for the mayoral elections. All our elections are off year. We don't have odd-year elections in that area. The national stuff is even year. And it's hard enough getting them to come out for our local stuff anyway. So I would be even worried. That's a good question.
But it would force the electorate to be more cognizant of the councilman in those alternating years. I would still think you should say in the odd years, but if the mayor, for example, gets elected in 2009, and it's a 2-year term for a 4-year term, and it's a 2-year term for common council, then in 2011 it's only council and zoning that will be running. And I do think if you decide to recommend a consolidation of the planning and zoning, that the terms need to be staggered. You need to start out with a number of 2-year terms, a number of 4-year terms, and and stagger it, because I think it would not be good, actually, it probably wouldn't be great for the common council either, to have a complete turnover. That's,
And now we do.
But we have that risk.
but it could happen, it could
Yeah,
happen
it's
now.
just with 21 members, it's
Yeah.
unlikely.
But attrition's like 10 or 15%.
Board of Ed has staggered.
Unless, if you have a turnover, you would actually want to have a turnover. If something was so fundamentally, so profoundly out of whack that they got rid of the entire council, you probably want to let them do that. Because if you didn't let them do that, there'd be a riot. Something would have to be we would have to screw up so much that if you tried to stop that somehow, like, playing around with the staggering system, you could have a problem. But it's never going to happen. Listen, the council follows the mayor. So whoever is mayor, essentially whether he's a Democrat or a Republican, gets most of the rest of the members. If you actually look at the results, that when they were printed out in script form in the old lever machines, the guy first would get most of the votes. And literally, as you went down from left to right, the guy at the very end would sometimes not get any votes. They actually wouldn't go all the way down to the end and pull that trigger. But if they did, they would try to stay in the same line that they voted for the mayor. To get them to go down or up that's pretty hard to do, and that's for the retail politics. I remember you, Mr. Rotella, totally.
They were better with the bubble sheets now.
Oh, yeah. To turn the page? I don't think so.
Yeah, on the back,
Well,
on the
we
back
have
side.
it now, it's 2 pages.
Right, right.
Let me just briefly about a learning curve on zoning. Zoning is almost a strategic type of position. You're determining how the geography of the city is going to be used for commercial and recreational purposes. And it's not really that hard to figure out that maybe a nuclear power plant is not the best place to put in a residential district, being slightly facetious. The learning curve with zoning is a process. You can show up there with average intelligence and education and make a really good decision using common sense. It may not be legally enforceable because you screwed up how you made the decision, but the decision itself might be proper. And that's why you've got professionals there that can help you with emotions and the counting of the votes and all that kind of stuff, which does take some time to learn. Planning is much more mechanical. I mean, you're being asked to determine how thick a concrete wall should be, how big eaves should be, how far setback should be. And that's information that you may not come to naturally. So with new guys on planning, you really have to rely on the professionals that come with it. So that's, and I was not on planning, so I can't really speak for that, but it is much more mechanical, and the learning curve will be that much longer. But it's not really that long in any event.
Thank you. Any other questions or
The
comments?
school board, I believe, is 4-year terms,
I think so.
and
There's-
they also.
Yeah, there's some
There's two
couple of
years
twos
in
and
there.
fours, yeah.
2s and
And it's
4s.
staggered.
Combination.
It's all staggered also.
Yes, and it's staggered.
Would it make sense to have different terms for people within districts, say versus at large or vice versa?
You know,
Provide some
I'm gonna have to,
continuity?
I would have to defer to Corporation Council, because I think the school board operates under slightly different statutes, I think. So,
They have special statutes of their own, and I think it's only 2 when they're filling vacancies. Otherwise, it's 4, but they stagger.
There is no representation.
We have de facto minority representation, but it's ad hoc. We've done it ourselves. The school board actually has by statute minority representation. And just to be clear, it's not about minorities, it's about political representation. You can't have too many Democrats or too many Republicans.
What I was wondering is, as our city gets more and more, complex, would a staggered term on the common council make sense? So we do have continuity and we wouldn't have a complete turnover of the common council.
Well, you'd have to go to a term length greater than 2,
Right.
unless you want to do even an odd year election.
If you do either a 2 or, I don't know, 3 is possible, or a 4-year term, something along that line. Would it make sense?
You could do 2 if we could do even year elections, but I don't know if we can have, if the statute allows us to have local elections on even
There appears to provide some flexibility.
So you could stay with 2, and every year there'd be a council election.
Would that have any benefit, is what I'm asking?
It wouldn't to me.
No.
It wouldn't, I don't think that we're maintaining a fairly static council. We think those numbers would move too much if we had a staggered system. You make a case that they would actually, people would be even more intransigent in their seats because you ask people to come out every year for another local election. It's like, I'm gonna let these guys stick around for a couple of years, I'll vote again.
Another question is, I've heard it said by several people that the common council is, the number of members is too large. What is your perspective on that?
The city of Danbury's got, whatever, it's got 80,000 people. I think this present council started out when they were somewhere south of 50,000. It kind of reminds me of the U.S. Congress. At some point, a representative was tied to a certain amount of people, and they're not anymore. It's done now by a certain amount of seats. If you follow that logic, you're going to have to lose districts. That's a sort of long way of saying that 21 people is not too many people to represent 100,000 people, which is where we're going. That means I'm going to represent 5,000 people. That's filling up the Eye Center. How can I possibly represent every one of them, even if they were all Democrats? I mean, there's no way that I can represent every one of them. The conflicts in that group alone are staggering. But to cut that figure by a third, which means I'd be representing 8,000, 10,000, I'm getting even farther away from my constituency. Having said that, it's really uncomfortable on that day. As there's 21 guys who were packed in the sardines. I don't even unfold my stuff. I do this because I just don't have enough room to do that. But you know what? I can handle that for a couple of hours. It's not the worst thing in the world. We are packed in tightly, and it looks like there's a phalanx of guys up there. Maybe it looks a little weird, like there's too many. I don't.
Maybe that should be in the capital budget to expand.
Yes. We could go to tiers. We'll put 2 tiers.
I do a little, renovation work. I would be very happy to open up the walls and,
Just kind of, that could be adjusted very easily. And you could have only, instead of 7 at-large candidates, have 5. Leave 2 in every ward, so it cuts it down to 19, gives you a little more space on the dais. And you could also go for the at-large positions, make that a 4-year term, and then 2-year terms for each of the council.
Would that be legal?
Sure.
You could do that?
One of the things that was recommended to us because of the minority representations on the council was, rather than we've had in the past where Democrats got a lot more votes than any of the Republicans, but the Republicans still had to take their seats. Someone recommended to us that we nominate 2 from each party in each ward, and the top 3 vote getters from each ward would then would win. So you wouldn't have at-large candidates, but it would also build in a guarantee that 1/3 of the members would be of the minority party.
Listen, there's a lot of stuff you can do. I mean, we could sit here for the next 3 weeks debating different processes and keying in different scenarios, and anytime you make a change, there'll be repercussions, I guarantee you. You have, no matter how much you're doing your homework, and how smart we think we are, when we make a change, there will be repercussions that we didn't foresee. And then it'll be left to another charter revision commission to deal with.
In 20 years.
In 20 years, exactly. Not in 2 years. When you talk about term length.
Oh, yeah.
At the end of the day, the question you need to ask yourself, is the system working? And I have been there when there were so many Democrats we had to give away our seats to Republicans. I've been there when the Republicans owned every seat. You couldn't get a seat in that caucus because it was filled with Republicans. I've been during both sides. But when I step back and say, is the city functioning? I give Danbury an A+. In terms of the function of its municipality, we have been through these massive and disturbing political issues, and I won't, burden you with recreating them here. But in terms of the function of the municipality itself, are the roads getting paved? Are the sewers functioning? Are the storm drains being cleared? Are the people being paid? Is the city itself as a functioning municipality working? The answer to me is yes, and the answer point well. So you might want to make it work a little bit better. But when you start getting into these massive universal changes, you run a risk that you might wind up making it work out as well. So if you feel the city is working, maybe you want to say, okay. And if you feel that it's not, I mean, maybe you guys don't feel the city's working, and you really want to get in there and roll up your sleeves and fix it. But I'm in it every day, and it's working pretty good. I have big fights with people, big fights with Corporation Council, disagreements. Fights with the administration, fights with a member of the council, and I gotta tell you something, that we work stuff out and we get stuff done in spite of all. And I think the city is in pretty good hands. I don't mean because they're in my hands. I mean, I'm gonna retire someday, and the same guy staying here now, I would insist that the city was still in my hands.
We would like to see some of the language cleared up, things that were discussed.
Boy, I can't emphasize that.
Yeah, that statute, the stipulation.
I mean, I can tell you stuff that would scare you.
Well, that's beyond our agenda, so we can't do it tonight. But I would recommend, if you would like to put it together, come back, and we will.
Okay. That's a deal.
We need to make it an agenda
That's a
item,
deal.
and we will actually,
Yeah.
we'll look at it. Okay, anything else you'd like to say to us about term lengths, term limits, anything
You know,
about terms?
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
Mr. Levy brought up an interesting point. He brought up the point of staff for the council. You two guys are here, you're both in the council. Al's here. Al, I think before mentioned that the city clerk worked for the council. It's not really too clear what the city clerk does, although everybody accepts that she's, or the city clerk's position is involved with the council. Does the council need its own staff, and does that require a charter change?
We had concerns about the scope and activity of the city clerk for quite some time. Just want to be more clear on the definition of the services that we would receive for the common council. Never really has been detailed to us. We do get some support from the city clerk. We also have had support from a part-time staffer, but we still would like some more service just dedicated to city council work.
What type of work would that be?
A lot of record keeping, making sure we receive timely mailings.
Isn't that the city clerk's duty to keep all the records of the common council and prepare agendas and?
Well, it hasn't been that way in the past. We had a part-time city clerk that used to do a lot of that record keeping and activity. But now.
So you mean the assistant city clerk?
But now it's
Which
pretty much all
that job got eliminated, correct?
Right.
Okay, right.
So, things like that. We're just,
I have constituents that would like to see that position eliminated. That is not my position. I would like to see that position maintained. There have been attempts in the past to eliminate it. I think it's a pretty good position. But it's sort of an ambiguous elected position, and it's pretty hard to tell an elected official what they can and cannot do, what they have to do, what they're supposed to do. No, I'm not making any implications here. It's just the nature of elected positions. I would like, however, we've been fighting for quite some time to maintain, or at least at this point restore to some extent, an assistant. It's probably beyond your scope because we have the authority to do that.
Yeah.
We just have not been able to get the votes in the council.
Okay, so in a budget item,
It's a
that
pure
position
budget
was
item.
voted down,
Yeah,
and
the mayor
for
presents
whatever
the
reason.
budget, and it's not in there, and we have a big thing in the caucus.
Trying
and
to add it.
We want to add it, we make an amendment, the amendment fails, the amendment passes, but it doesn't pass for the rest of the council. At some point, we will get an assistant. They are very, very helpful. There's a lot of things that, look, it's a 21-member legislative body with no staff. I would like to see an attorney attached to the council. There is, the present city attorneys are in a difficult position because they feel with some justification they actually work for the mayor. I mean, they work for you and me. They don't work for the mayor, they don't work for the council, they work for the people, but they kind of feel like they work for the mayor. And if there's tension between the council and the mayor, and there is often tension between the council and the mayor, we have to kind of go see the mayor's guys to get an opinion, and we're never surprised when that opinion just never seems to amplify what we're saying. So how does that happen every single time? It probably would be a good idea if the city continues to grow, to get the council, and you have to do this by charter, I think, or the Corporation Council. But it would be a good idea, I think, to take Councilman Levy's recommendation into consideration and get an attorney for council. It doesn't have to be full-time. It's just an independent attorney that the council, through the president, whatever mechanism you want to do, can consult. That is absolutely independent in this city.
Do we need to go to the charter to do that? Is that something they could do? Couldn't they go out and hire?
There's been talk about, no, the common council doesn't have the authority to appoint attorneys. There's been some talk through my 30 years of making the appointment of at least some of the legal staff subject to civil service, which would provide some level of protection, but not totally insulate the individual the way that Councilman Bartolo is describing. I think that if you wanted to do such a thing, it should be done by charter.
So we could do it under the charter.
Is the council better served by a civil service secretary or?
I think if you wanted an assistant, you would want the
someone-
assistant to be civil service. Because they're all.
I mean, why, do we need an elected secretary to this common council? When and I'm using the word secretary in a generic term.
Yeah.
That's what you have now. It's called city clerk.
I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, all of
But
it's.
that's an elected
That's
position
what I'm
that
saying.
isn't truly defined, and there's no accountability.
I don't
Is
know
there a
what
need
it
for an
is.
elected?
I don't know why when the state statutes came down, they named the city clerk the town clerk instead of vice versa, because really the town clerk was this vestige from the old town city from like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when we had county government, which we don't have. We don't have sheriffs. We still have town clerks by statute. We don't have city clerks by statute. I think it ought to be the other way around. We ought to have city clerks, the town clerk would be an elected position. You know, I don't have an answer to that question. I'm comfortable with the city clerk, and it may just be osmosis. We've always had one. I'm comfortable with them. I like the fact that, you know, the secretary of the council is an elected official, they're completely independent. QED. But do we have to have one? Probably not. You know, we could probably get along with a civil servant. I'm not. I don't share the theory that a civil servant is as independent as I think